Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast with your hosts, Reese Downing and Jacob Workman.
What is up, everyone? Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast, NCAA edition, Army-Navy week. So we're down to just one game this week, unfortunately. Joining, as always, co-host Reese Downing. Reese, what's going on?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
It was a pretty good conference championship weekend. It's pretty shitty. I mean, I guess the one benefit is with the playoff is we actually have more meaningful games this year. We're not down to just 3 left, essentially, with the 2 semifinals and the national championships. So you'll at least have a little bit more to look forward to this year. We'll kick off with a little conference championship results. So in the ACC, Clemson defeated SMU 34-31 on a last-second field goal. The Big Ten championship, Oregon beat Penn State 45-37. Arizona State absolutely throttled Iowa State 45-19, and they had the backups in pretty much the whole fourth quarter. Georgia, Texas went to overtime. Georgia won 22-19. Jacksonville State, Western Kentucky. Jacksonville State won 52-12. Army, Navy. Army won 35-14. Boise, pretty good performance again for Genty. Still, unfortunately, doesn't look like it's going to be enough, but Boise State won 21-7. Ohio beat Miami of Ohio in the MAC championship 38-3, and then Marshall went to Louisiana and beat them 31-3 to win the Sun Belt. Reese, any thoughts on conference championships?
I mean, it was a fun weekend overall. I think Oregon Penn State game was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. The Clemson SMU game was unfortunate. SMU, I thought, was going to take that game to overtime, and that final drive for Clemson to kick that field goal to win it was disappointing. If you're rooting for SMU anyway. Georgia, Texas, I was, again, a little surprised. I thought Texas was going to be able to handle Georgia a little bit more. We'll see what happens with them now that Carson Beck's dealing with that elbow injury. Looks like Georgia may be dealing with that throughout the playoffs. Overall, I think, a lot of fun. The Arizona State game was a blast to watch. That's We're going to cover it here in a minute, what our college playoff predictions were going into the season, but neither one of us had either of these teams anywhere close to the Big 12 championship. So it turned out to be a good weekend for the last big round of games anyway, before we hit bowls.
Yeah. In the Big 12 preview, we actually were both very high on Arizona State, though. We did talk pretty highly of them. We didn't think it was quite going to be what it was, but I mean, Kenny's just been building and building there, obviously, with Sam Levitt coming in. He's had a hell of a year, and Scadaboo. I mean, Jesus, Scadaboo's ridiculous. He's getting overshadowed because of Genty, but his numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah.
So speaking of Ashton Genty, let's go odds for the Heisman finalist. The final 4 were announced for this Saturday. It's kind of surprising that they even invited 4 people, I think. Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty, Dylan Gabriel, the Oregon quarterback, and Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami, are the 4 that were invited. Travis Hunter is a minus 2,500 favorite, while Ashton Genty is second at plus 1,000. Gabriel and Ward are both plus 25,000. So I'm still not sure why they got invited. I would have been perfectly fine with just inviting 2 here. Like 6 weeks ago, probably, if not more, I was pretty high on Dylan Gabriel winning the Heisman, but clearly the numbers for Hunter and Genty were way better, and Gabriel, they didn't really lean on him as much later in the year. James kind of took over the running back for Oregon, so Gabriel's numbers weren't as fantastic as they were earlier in the season. But down to Hunter and Genty, I don't get this. What Genty's doing is ridiculous, and I mean, Barry Sanders even came out and he's actively saying, I want this guy to break my records. I don't care if it takes more games. Don't listen to what people talk about when they're talking about more games. The record's the record. It's outstanding what he's doing, especially in this modern era that, teams are throwing the hell out of the ball. No one's focused on ridiculous. He's going to have almost 3,000 yards if they make a run in the playoff. It's just
almost 3,000 yards. And one of the craziest stats to me is I looked at rush yards per carry, and he's 3rd in the nation right now, but The two guys that are ahead of him have 155 rushes and 147 rushes, and they're averaging 7.5 and 7.3 yards per carry. Jonty is third at 7.26, but he's rushed it 344 times. Like, that level of efficiency is just insane, and it's not something that we're likely to see for a long time to come. I'm with you. Like, we've talked about it a lot over the past few weeks. I don't get it.
Yeah, for it to be as big of a runaway as they're saying it is, it doesn't make sense to me. And and I brought it up, I think it was last week, but like some major publications put out Twitter polls of who should win, and none were even close. Genty destroyed in every single one of them. And if some Heisman voters were tweeting over the weekend saying it was the night of it was Friday night because it was the conference championship game night. I think they were saying like anyone that has already voted for the Heisman should lose their vote. Like, they're not even giving him the chance for the conference championship game, which does matter. I mean, that's why they do it after it. It's why they still allow voting. And I just don't see why he's such a clear-cut favorite. Like, it truly does not make sense to me. I don't get it. So next week we'll talk about who won. I'm sure it'll be Travis Hunter. But, I mean, if anyone's into odds, I mean, Ashton Genty at plus 1,000, why not give it a shot? You never know what's going to happen. Top transfer portal players. So right now I'm just going to do a top 20 as opposed to what we normally do where we just give out every single person that's entered the portal. This is the top 20 ranked by ESPN. So take it for what it's worth. Some of these to me are a little off, but we'll get a little bit more of a position by position breakdown as the weeks go on. Right now it's just strictly the top 20 that they've ranked in the portal. Number one player in the portal to them is Darian Mensah, quarterback from Tulane. Obviously, he came in, freshman, played unbelievable. He was supposed to be the third string going into the year. So what he ended up doing with Tulane, I mean, people were definitely not expecting that, especially with a new head coach. So that's kind of a huge deal. We'll see where he ends up. Number two is Eric Singleton. He's a wide receiver from Georgia Tech. Number three is Williams. And we're going to have to little pronunciation on this one. I believe it's Waneri, defensive end from Missouri. Jaheim Otis, defensive tackle from Alabama. We're going to go back-to-back Kentucky wide receivers here. Dane Key and Berrien Brown, both wide receivers from Kentucky. A quarterback everyone's heard of, Miller Moss, quarterback from USC. I'm interested to see where he ends up. Kevin Concepcion, wide receiver from NC State. He had a great year. He's got a couple years left, too, so he's actually quite a weapon that's available in the portal. Dylan Thieneman, safety from Purdue. Nick Anderson, wide receiver from Oklahoma. Ahmad Hardy, running back from UL Monroe. One of the better names, Clev Lubin, offensive linebacker from Coastal Carolina. Another name everyone's probably heard, Jackson Arnold, quarterback from Oklahoma. Guy we've talked about just because he's a Ball State guy, Tanner Koziel, tight end. Caden Salter, quarterback from Liberty. We talked about him too, especially in the previews. Reese actually had Liberty go into the playoffs. They were his group of 5 team to make it. Salter, I think right now, I can't remember. I think it was Colorado, Florida State, and I don't remember the other one were his rumored visits that he has scheduled. I know Florida State has been rumored to land Boston College quarterback Thomas Castellanos. We'll see what happens with that. Hopefully that's not the only option, but he did not make the top 20.
Yes, Syracuse, Colorado, and Florida State.
Syracuse was the other one, yeah. Eric Rivers, wide receiver from Florida International, the airport. Another Kentucky player, Keyshawn Silver, defensive tackle. We got Ethan, Ani Anwa, offensive tackle from Rice. That's another good one. And this is the best name in the portal. And I do remember this just from watching this dude earlier in the season. Fluff Bothwell. He's a running back from South Alabama. That's a great name. And Micah Hudson, he was a stud wide receiver at Texas Tech. So that's the top 20 available right now, ranked on ESPN. Like I said, as the weeks go on, we'll get a little deeper into this, putting them by position and stuff like that, and the more and more guys that enter the portal. And honestly, here, I think they can even sign. I don't know if they can sign yet or not, but I know here within the next week or so, the portal does open where they can start signing. So we'll obviously start covering that. Some coaching news. I know we have a talk of potential Bill Belichick joining the college football ranks at North Carolina. There was a rumor that he basically gave them like a 400-page layout of how he would run everything today. It is just a rumor, but most rumors in the college football world seem to come true for the most part. So,
man, what I would do to get my hands on that manifesto?
Yeah, I know. Well, he did an interview on Pat McAfee show yesterday, and he kind of like laid it all out there, like basically how college football is the NFL now, and with what will happen, and like he actually laid it out very well. I'm sure the 400-page thing was even more detailed as to how practices would work, and the shirts would be tucked in, and like exact things to a T, because that's Bill Belichick. But I mean, the way that college football is going, like, why would you not? The only thing that kind of sucks to me is I would like him to go to the NFL just to try to get the wins record. But
yeah,
I also, as more of a college football fan, also say, how fucking awesome would that be? And if he goes to North Carolina, like that's the conference I watch. So, I mean, I think it would be a really cool thing. What are your thoughts on Bill Belichick going to the NFL?
I mean, I think it's crazy, especially considering the school that he's thinking about going to in North Carolina. That's not something I ever would have called out. I'm with you. I would like to see him go back to the NFL. There's a particular team that I have interest in that may be looking for a quarterback or a coach at the end of the year. But all that said, like watching Belichick be able to coach players, I think is extremely interesting to see how he's going to interact with these kids, especially dealing with players that are doing this transfer portal shit where they're leaving year after year, and how he's going to manage that. He does have some GM experience with his time in the Patriots, so I think that'll give UNC a little bit of a leg up. But watching him go to battle with Dabo every year is going to be a lot of fun. Going back on one thing on the transfer portal, Lane Kiffin came out, was talking about how dumb the system is, and I just have to like double down on that. Like I don't understand why they opened the transfer portal before the bowl games start.
I think they have to, so they can get enrolled by the semester starting.
Right, but I mean, like with all this stuff playing out, like you would think that they would put something in place. It screws so many teams. And then you have all like that. When are we going to start hearing all the guys that are going to be sitting out of these bowl games, because they're going to be leaving their teams or whatever?
Yeah, but see, I like obviously Kenny Dillingham to me is far and away much more advanced in what's going on in modern college football than most coaches. But Kenny Dillingham basically came out, and like some of the players told him like, hey, we're probably going to go in the portal, but we want to wait. And he's like, no, he's like, enter the portal. You want to be able to be first available for these teams. You want to be able for them to take you now. He goes, we're still going to let you stay on the team through the playoffs. Like you're still going to be there. He said, but you want to get in there now. Like he uses so much common sense. It's almost baffling that like someone could use common sense in the NCAA, because you don't see it very much. But
so I didn't know that. I didn't know that if they announced that they were transferring to a different team, if they were allowed to play through the bowl games.
Yes, they can stay.
Okay. All right. Well, so maybe that's a slightly different situation. I still understand Kiffin's perspective because it does create some distractions, but if the guys are able to play with the team, even despite that, and the transfer doesn't happen until afterwards, then I guess that's not as big of a deal. And shout out to Dilly again for putting his own interest, or putting his players' interest ahead of his own. That dude's quickly become one of my favorite coaches.
Yeah. I mean, he gets it. Like I don't know. And Lane Kiffin, of all people, to be bitching about the portal, like, I mean, try winning, Lane. How about then you worry about it? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
He's one of the coaches that brings in the best rosters every year in the portal, but yet still doesn't win. So, like, I don't know. That's probably part of why he's not making it. But so college football playoff predictions. So at the beginning of the year, if you guys watched, we did a college football preview episode, or playoff preview, where we essentially picked our brackets and ran through how we thought the season would go. We'll start with my bracket from the beginning of the year. So I had Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, Oklahoma State, Texas, Utah, Oregon, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Va-Tech, and Boise State. So as you can see here, so my final four I actually have 3 of the 4 teams from my Final Four that are actually in the playoffs, which is a start. Some obvious disasters in my little bottom right bracket with Utah, Vautech, and Florida State. That might have, Vautech wasn't terrible, but Florida State and Utah might have been 2 of the most disappointing teams in college football this year. If you go bottom left, I had Oklahoma State as my 4 seed. Again, absolute disaster. Top left, I actually Notre Dame, Ohio State, both of those are alive. So, I mean, overall, I had 6 correct, which is half the field. I mean, that's not terrible, especially with this the way this college football season went. Jesus, I feel like it was unpredictable. So,
yeah, there's a lot of parity.
Yeah, so to get half the field, I mean, I don't consider that too bad. And my national champion pick at the time, at the beginning of the year, was Ohio State. I would not pick them right now to win the national title. I don't think their offense is good enough to win it. I don't think Ryan Day is a good enough coach to win it. So I'm not obviously picking a new national champion right now. That's something that will happen in future episodes. But to get 6 of the field isn't bad. I got the group of 5 right with Boise State. And like I said, 3 of the final 4 teams I have picked are alive. So not a bad thing. We'll jump over to Reese. So Reese had Ohio State, Ole Miss, Florida State, Kansas State, Oregon, Notre Dame, Texas, Utah, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma State, and Liberty. So if we look at Reese's final 4, we have Ohio State and Oregon. Both are there. So 2, he had half the final 4 there. And he did have 5 correct picks from the preseason. Liberty was his group of 5, like I mentioned earlier, with Caden Salter, and they were very close to being that team. Let's see if he has any brackets that are a disaster like mine were. Not really. Well, I guess your bottom right one was about as bad as mine, other than you had Notre Dame at least, which made it. I didn't even have a single team that made my bottom right one. So Notre Dame, or your final 4, Florida State playing Ole Miss in one of the semifinals. Ole Miss was decent. They were close to making the playoff. And then the other side, Ohio State, Oregon, which, I mean, realistically could be a game we see again. You never know. So,
yeah.
So 5, he got 5 right. I had 6 right. So, I mean, like I said, for as crazy as this college football season was, to get almost half the field, I mean, I feel like that's pretty good predictions there. If you go back and listen to our win totals from the beginning of the year, our win totals were actually pretty much spot on. We did very good on the win totals. So college football playoff was announced, the actual bracket. We're going to go through this real quick. So we're going to kick it off on Friday, December 20th. Number 9, IU is going to go on the road to number 3, Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 7.5-point favorite. That game is going to be at 8 p.m. on ABC, and that will lead into a winner of that one facing number 2, Georgia, in the Sugar Bowl. Reese, what are your thoughts on that?
The IU Notre Dame game is going to be a little interesting. I think you and I talked about this, I think, a little bit yesterday. IU's been able to sit back for a few weeks in prep, and Notre Dame hasn't seen an offense like IU in a few weeks. So I think this is going to be an interesting game. The ticket prices are freaking astronomically ridiculous, which tells you a lot with it being the Indiana Bowl. I will also note here that it says South Bend, Indiana, not Notre Dame, Indiana.
I know. So, don't you love that?
So I do like that. It kind of hurts to see Georgia sitting in that 2 spot, but it is what it is.
I don't know. I don't think Georgia's offense is good. They might have a backup quarterback. I probably gonna have a backup quarterback, which that might actually be to their benefit. I don't know, and that game's gonna be inside. I feel like, especially if IU were to win this, you put IU's offense inside in a dome. I think that benefits them greatly. Obviously, weather's probably going to be a factor here. You're going to have a late Friday night in December, late December in northern Indiana. I mean, that's going to be cold as shit. Maybe even some snow. We just saw IU play in the snow when they played Purdue, and they beat them 66-0. So I don't know if that's going to be too much of a factor, but overall, I think that we're looking at a big game here. Obviously, Cignetti was pretty pissed off. He came out with a press conference about what do we have to do to get a home game. He said if our name was Michigan, we would have a home game, which is probably true. That's college football, though. It's part of the ridiculousness.
Looks like the weather on the 20th in South Bend, high of 37, low of 29. Precipitation's only 16%, so I'm not going to get any snow. but it's going to be a cold one.
Yeah, I mean that's still a while to predict, I feel, but yeah, I mean the wind obviously will be a factor too, kind of wind we get, but overall, I mean, I think everyone's going to be pretty excited for that game. It's getting the national spotlight on a Friday night. It's still a standalone game, so and it will be on ESPN and ABC. So Saturday, Penn State again. Unfortunately, you will be playing in the daytime. They can't catch a break. Number 12 SMU will be going on the road to number 5 Penn State. Penn State will be an 8.5-point favorite at noon. That game is also on TNT. So they're just getting the shaft all over the place. And the winner of that will advance to face number 3 Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. Reese.
Love Boise State getting the bye here, and I am really rooting to see an SMU Boise State matchup in the quarterfinals.
Could you imagine if we got Boise IU to go to the national championship?
That would be insane.
That would be awesome. The thought of IU even in the tournament is amazing to me. Like just thinking of IU football and where it's came, like it's quite a leap.
Light the cigs.
Yeah, I saw a shirt that said Catholics versus cigarettes, and I laughed a lot. It was a pretty sweet shirt. So SMU obviously lost in the conference championship to Clemson at the very end. They had a terrible, terrible stretch during the game, and then all of a sudden kicked it up late, made a hell of a comeback, tied the game, and then unfortunately just couldn't hold on and give up a long-ass field goal to lose. Penn State offense looked decent for a little bit against Oregon, and then it just kind of fell apart. I do think their defense held up pretty well. I think this is a good game. It's just, to me, it's SMU's just got to be better. They can't have that offensive performance they did against Clemson. They need to have that for 4 quarters. If they can play a full game of offense, SMU can easily win this game. But the line at 8.5 to me seems kind of crazy. Penn State when they've played good teams, they have not won by any large amounts by any means. I mean, they barely played any good teams, but they didn't win any of the ones they should have by a large amount. And then obviously the look ahead to the winner of that going to the Fiesta Bowl to play Boise State is awesome also.
Yeah, Penn State's perplexing, man. They're perplexing every year. The games that they should be blowing out, they don't. And then games where they're like, well, they didn't blow these games out, so they should logistically get their ass beat. They hang in. You know, what they did with Oregon and Ohio State games, this team's impossible to predict.
Yeah, and I mean, Aller's playing well, and again, I got to just type this guy's name out so I remember it because I always forget it. I think it's Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator that came from Kansas. He is doing interviews for head coaching jobs, so I still think that's a huge factor here. Like, I don't like coaches do it. This is like when the NFL, when coaches are doing interviews and stuff. Like, I don't like that. Like, and he has completely changed that team. Drew Aller is a much better player with him as the offensive coordinator, and I think he's a very large difference maker. So if he's focused on interviews and maybe even takes a job before this starts, I mean, obviously he would still ride through the playoffs and have the job, but still, like, then he's focused on the portal for a different program. Like, there's a lot of things that factor into that. And for this being the first year, like, guys don't know how to adjust to that. That's the other thing we're going to see in this too, is like, how do these teams play off a break? Like, we haven't really got to see this yet. And this will be the first time where we've seen where a team plays a week earlier and they're going to face a team that had even a longer break, they had the extra week and they haven't played for, at that point, it'll be like 3 weeks. I mean, these are pretty big differences of things that we're not used to seeing. So, will Georgia, Boise, Oregon, Arizona State all start those games with some rust to kick off, because they're going to be playing teams that they can't be sitting around waiting to get that rust kicked off.
Yeah. I will say, and I've seen this across a number of channels, so I assume that it's accurate, but you know, things could change. I believe that Kotelnicki is coming back to Penn State next year. He announced it earlier today. He was up for the job for West Virginia. I think was the primary.
That was one of them.
They thought that he was going to land, but he has announced saying that he is looking forward to 2025 at Penn State, and there's been a couple sources that have said that he is coming back.
Yeah, I wonder if that's.
Maybe he's lying and wait for Franklin.
I
mean,
I don't know. I think Franklin will be there a while. So, but yeah, I mean, interesting news if that's true. That would be very good for Penn State, and obviously not have to worry about any of the nonsense. So next game after that, 4 p.m. on the same day, Saturday the 21st, number 13 Clemson will be going on the road to number 4 Texas. Texas is going to open as an 11.5-point favorite. That game is 4 p.m. on TNT, and the winner of that will be going to face number 4 Arizona State in the Peach Bowl.
Did you say 11.5-point?
Texas is an 11.5-point favorite.
All right. That's a little surprising to me. I think that spread's a little salty.
Yeah, I think so too.
Texas defense has been the reason why they've won so many games this year, but I wasn't overly impressed with it last week. And I think there's been a couple games where you kind of put your head up. Phil Maffa is going to have a big game in order for Clemson to win, I think. But yeah, that 11.5-point spread is a little eyebrow raising.
Yeah, I like Clemson a lot in that one. It seems crazy to me that it's that high. I guess the knock is Clemson's offense has been very inconsistent this year, and that's probably where the worry comes in, is can they do anything against the Texas defense? But if Klubnik has a game like he can have, I think they can score. So yeah, it's an interesting situation here. Obviously, next week we'll be picking this game and getting a little bit more into it. But thoughts on the winner of that going to going to the Peach Bowl in Georgia to face Arizona State?
I love it. I mean, the fact that Boise State and Arizona State both got buys into the quarterfinals is awesome. I am hoping for an Arizona State Oregon semifinal. I think that would be a very, very fun game to watch.
Be awesome. Yeah, I still wish those quarterfinals were on the home fields. Like let Oregon play in Autzen. Boise, let's get a Smurf turf game. Arizona State, we watched them storm the field twice in the same game. Georgia's Georgia. Like those would be so much better if they were on home fields. And imagine like SMU Penn State winner has to go to the Smurf turf. You know it's gonna be shitty weather there. Like freezing cold on the Smurf turf in a small crowd environment. Like it's awesome. Like let Boise rake in that benefit of the money from the home game. Like it pisses me off. That's one of the changes. People are bitching a lot about how they want the format changed, but I think that's the number one thing we've got to change. Those need to be home games. The final game of the weekend, next weekend, number 7 Tennessee will be going on the road to number 6 Ohio State. Ohio State will be a 7.5-point favorite at 8 p.m. on ABC. The winner of that will be going to face number 1 Oregon in the Rose Bowl.
I don't think we're going to see a rematch of Oregon Ohio State. I'll just say that. We'll get to our picks next week, I think, but
yeah.
Will Howard did not look good last week, and he's had some question marks around him throughout the year, in my opinion. I think Iamaleava and Heupel's offense can cause problems for Ohio State, and obviously home field advantage isn't really there for the Buckeyes. So, I mean, to be in a night game in Columbus, maybe there's a little bit of extra juice. I don't think the Volunteers have played Ohio State in a really, really long time. So it'll be interesting to see these two teams go up against each other, but I'm not nearly as confident on Ohio State now as I was, especially at the beginning of the year when we picked them as national champions.
Right. Well, and Michigan kind of laid a blueprint out, and one thing Tennessee can do is run the dance. Like Dylan Sampson might have the biggest game of his life in this game.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're going to keep the ball. Obviously, Nico's there. They still can throw the ball. Like I think Heupel, and they've got like I said, there's some coaches that are good with a lot of time to prepare. I think Heupel's going to have this offense ready for the Ohio State defense, and I don't trust Ryan Day. I mean, obviously Chip Kelly will do what he does, but Tennessee's defense isn't terrible.
Especially their defensive line. Their defensive line is strong, and that's two of their, like their main juice is a lot of times from that running game. So yeah, was Howard obviously Ohio State has very good receivers, so if they can end up throwing the ball against Tennessee's defense, that would be huge. Obviously that's probably what's going to be the chance to keep them in the game. But yeah, Tennessee, I still think this game should be at Tennessee. Like I still don't quite understand how they got I get how they got the benefit, but it is what it is. Potential matchup of Tennessee, Oregon, or Ohio State, Oregon. What are your thoughts on that? I want to see Tennessee, Oregon, just because we've already seen Ohio State, Oregon. I mean, it would be kind of fun to see a rematch of that game, but at the same time, that's another matchup that we don't see very often. And I'm all about having parity in this as much as possible. So I'd rather see Tennessee go up against Oregon than two teams that we're going to be able to see play virtually every year.
Do you think either of the Big Ten or any of the three Big Ten teams in the first round make it out?
I'm not confident Ohio State's going to make it past Penn State, SMU. SMU can hang around. They hung around with Clemson, and I think Clemson is just as good as a team as Penn State. The problem with Penn State is that they show up and they play close games, so it may come down to who has the ball last. I don't like it's a 12 p.m. game, so I think that's kind of against Penn State.
I would say I think that helps SMU. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, sorry for Carter and Scott. I would love to see IU beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. That would be crazy. I don't think it's going to happen, but
yeah, I don't really either.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the three Big Ten teams here, I think Penn State probably has the likeliest path between the three that are here. Ohio State being second, IU would be the shocker for me. But crazy things have happened this year. I mean, there's a lot of parity going on, and it just takes one game. So,
yeah, I actually saw a thing. Speaking of Penn State, someone had reported that like not all of Penn State's students requested tickets, so a lot of the allotment was going back, like to where it could be sold. And a lot of the Penn State students were raising hell on Twitter, like saying it was kind of like Taylor Swift tickets. Like they were all like, "We applied, we were in this lottery, and no one that I know got tickets." So there's a little bit of like a conspiracy theory, like, did they not allow us to get them so they could sell them for higher value to like the marketing and all the like sponsors and that shit to kind of let more people in? And that's the exact thing we don't need to be doing. That's why we have these games on home fields. Like this is the purpose. Like you want I think they did announce a whiteout, but you also want a student section of 50,000 or 40,000 or 20,000, whatever the hell the student section is. I think it was 20,000. I think they allotted 20,000 and they claim that like they didn't get anywhere near it.
If anything, this shit should be flip-flopped. Like the first round game should be Peach Bowl, Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and then the quarterfinal game should be at these teams' locations.
Yeah, that would be cool too. Yeah. Just for more benefit of
being one of the top four. Yeah, because there's no
right.
I mean, beyond I know you get the bye, but
oh, I mean, the bye is a big deal, but yeah, I still think, but these teams do get to keep the revenue, the home team. So that's where it's huge.
Yeah.
Like, why would you not want to be Penn State with one of the most largest stadiums bringing in just crazy money? And then there's Boise State that can't even play a home game, which would benefit greatly from that money. Like, yeah. I mean, there's a big difference there. It sucks, but so just some early before we move on to our Army Navy pick to kind of wrap this up. What matchup would you say could happen in the playoffs that you would really like to see? Like, what would be your dream in the quarter, semi, championship, anywhere? What would be the one game that you wish could happen?
Oh man, Boise State, Arizona State in the national championship game. That would be awesome. My wish. Yeah, seeing Scadaboo against Gianti, like that would be beautiful to me. That's two teams that we don't see in the college football playoff hardly ever. Two smaller market teams that have crazy fan bases, awesome coaching staff. It's against the norm. Like I don't want to see Clemson, Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Penn State. Notre Dame's not been in it for a while, but like even really Notre Dame, like if I can see two smaller teams in it, that would be ideal for me. So yeah, Arizona State, Boise State would be if I had to pick one, that would be it.
Yeah. And my dream playoff would go an Oregon, Arizona State semi with Boise beating Notre Dame in the other semi. And I don't care if it's Boise, Arizona State or Boise, Oregon, because Boise, Oregon was in Autzen this year. And it was honestly one of the best games of the year.
Yeah.
I would not mind that rematch. I think that would be awesome. But Arizona State, Boise obviously would be the like, I mean, you want to talk about pissed off. I talked a few weeks ago about I forget what the matchup was. It didn't happen. It was Notre Dame and someone, but clearly it's not this one. It's not Notre Dame IU. But I talked about how the Bob Iger, he would have the biggest erection on earth with that matchup. But this would be the reverse of that if it was Boise, Arizona State. Because you imagine how pissed off the advertisers would. There'd probably be a change to the playoff like the next day. Like they would figure out a way to change it. Because only real college football fans want that game. No marketing, no advertisers, no one on earth wants that game. And judging by how refereeing's gone this year, they probably wouldn't even allow that game, to be honest. So it obviously that's the dream. Oregon, Arizona State semi with Boise, Notre Dame in the other semi, and Boise hopefully just beating the hell out of them. And then whoever wins Oregon, Arizona State, I'd be cool with. But I am with you. Boise, Arizona State for the championship would be probably my dream matchup.
Yeah.
So to wrap up the week, we only have one game. It is Army-Navy week. Number 19, Army is a 6.5-point favorite facing Navy. Navy's a plus 198 on the money line. Over under of 38.5. This is at Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland, home of the Washington Commanders. Saturday at 3:30 on CBS. Reese, for the final regular season pick of the year, what do you have?
First of all, I think game of the year from a jersey perspective. Both these jerseys are absolutely badass.
They're awesome.
I love it. You can't really see it on the side of the Navy side, but they've got the Jolly Roger there. You can kind of see it in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But awesome jerseys. I know this game is historically close, but Army's been really good this year, and Navy's kind of fallen off towards the end of the season. I don't see this being close to 6.5, so I'm going to take Army minus the points in the over.
Yeah, Navy kind of fell off a little bit as the season went on. They just didn't seem to be as good. Yeah, you usually never see a 6.5 in this one. Still, the over-under stayed pretty low, though, at 38.5. I think we're probably going over here. And I actually like Army also. Army minus the 6.5. I just think this is a year where it doesn't seem like this game's going to be that close. So I do like Army to finish out the season. So that wraps up every regular season pick for this year. Next week, we are picking every bowl game, which will be a lot. And we're also going to pick the first round of the college football playoff. The bowl games obviously are the biggest crapshoot because we pick them, and then 3 minutes before the game starts, they announce 74 guys aren't playing. So obviously those picks are a little interesting, but we still do them.
It's not any different than picking Saturday or Sunday games on Tuesday nights. So
yeah, true. Especially in college football with the way that people just all of a sudden decide not to play.
Yeah.
Cam Rising. That does wrap up the regular season. So for Reese Downing, I'm Jacob Workman. Next Tuesday night, we're picking every bowl game and the first round of the college football playoffs. We will see you guys next week.
Cheers, guys.